Welcome to the Pardis channel. Today, we explain Deuteronomy chapter 1 in a clear and simple way, step by step. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to take a really nice, unhurried journey today through the historical beats and the life lessons of this very first chapter. We'll start with the context and God's command, move on to how they shared the massive leadership burden, talk about the spies and that infamous rebellion, cover the judgment and the defeat that followed, and wrap it all up with some key ideas and a quick recap. Let's get right into it. Section 1, Context and God's Command. So we're jumping right into the middle of a massive, absolutely crucial historical moment for the Israelites. The chapter opens by anchoring us perfectly in time and space. We are told exactly when this is happening. It's the 40th year. It's the first day of the 11th month since they actually left Egypt. 40 years. And Moses is standing there speaking to all the Israelites. And where exactly are they? They are east of the Jordan River. But what's really crucial to understand right here, in verse 4, is what just went down. Moses is giving this major address right after they've had these massive military victories. They just struck down Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who lived over in Heshbon, and Og, the king of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth. So imagine the scene. The people are sitting there, they are riding high on this immense victory, and right at that peak moment, Moses begins to clearly explain the law to them. The text specifically mentions they are in the Arabah. Now, let's do a little visualization exercise, all right? The Arabah is a geographic term. It refers to this vast, sweeping desert plain or valley just east of the Jordan River opposite Suf. Picture millions, literally millions of people camped out in this massive, dusty, open desert valley. And they are looking right across the river toward the very land they've been promised for generations. It's like they are right on the doorstep. And Moses is standing before them in this gigantic, expansive landscape, getting ready to recount exactly how they arrived at this exact spot. Moses starts his whole historical recap by taking them all the way back to a direct, crystal-clear command from God. He reminds them of what God had told them earlier in their journey. God said, "You have stayed long enough at this mountain. Break camp and advance." Just listen to the forward momentum in that. It's time to go. God tells them to turn and set out into the hill country of the Amorites and all the surrounding regions. He doesn't just say go, he gives them these sweeping, specific boundaries of the land. He maps it out, from the Arabah to the mountains, the Shephelah, the Negev, the seacoast, all the land of the Canaanites, all the way up to Lebanon and as far as the great river, the Euphrates. And then he says something so powerful. "See, I have given you this land. Go in and take possession of it." Now, that mountain Moses is referring to in that command, that's Horeb. You might know Horeb by its other name, Sinai. This is where the Israelites had been camped out for a really, really long time. It was a massive deal. It's where the covenant was made, right where they received the 10 Commandments literally out of the fire. It's where they were given their foundational laws, their societal instructions, the whole shebang. It was this incredible place of divine revelation. But here's the thing, a campsite is not a permanent home. God was essentially telling them, look, the time for preparation at Horeb is officially over. You've learned what you needed to learn. Now it's time to actually move forward and claim the promise that was given to your ancestors, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Section 2, Sharing the Leadership Burden. As Moses continues his speech, we're at verse 9 now, he brings up this major administrative nightmare that happened early on. He reminds the people of a beautiful but honestly overwhelming reality. God had multiplied them so incredibly fast that they were now as numerous as the stars in the sky. It's amazing. In fact, Moses pauses his whole historical recap right here just to bless them. He literally prays that the Lord, the God of their fathers, would increase them 1,000 times more. But then, he hits them with a very practical, almost desperate question. He says, "How can I bear your problems and your burdens and your disputes all by myself?" The sheer population boom meant that Moses, who was trying to function as a single centralized leader, was just breaking under the weight of managing their everyday conflicts. It was just too much for one person. So the crucial point is how Moses solved this. He systematically delegated his authority. He told the tribes, okay, you need to go and select wise, understanding, and respected men from among yourselves, people you trust. Moses then took these leading men and put together this brilliant, multi-tier judicial and administrative system. He appointed them as commanders over thousands, commanders of hundreds, commanders of 50s, and commanders of 10s, along with other tribal officials. Think about the sheer logistical genius of that organization organizational tree. This meant that no matter how small or how large a dispute was, there was a local, respected official instantly ready to step in and handle it. It completely lifted that impossible day-to-day burden right off of Moses' shoulders. But Moses didn't just hand over administrative power and walk away. Not at all. He gave these men incredibly strict ethical instructions. He basically charged these new judges to hear every single dispute and to judge fairly. And that applied whether the conflict was between two fellow Israelites or with a resident alien living among them. He explicitly commanded them, do not show partiality. You have to hear the small and the great exactly the same. And crucially, he told them, do not be afraid of any man. Why? Because judgment ultimately belongs to God. They were representing God's justice. Only the absolute hardest, most complex cases, the ones that were simply too difficult for these commanders, were to be brought all the way up to Moses to decide. Section 3, the Spies and Rebellion. Now, the narrative takes a really sharp turn. We move from this huge organizational success to a massive turning point of failure. Moses traces out the exact geographic route they took. Following God's command, they packed up, left Horeb, and marched through what Moses specifically calls a vast and dreadful desert. It wasn't a casual stroll. It was a harsh, unforgiving, totally waterless expanse, and they had survived it, seeing it with their own eyes. But they made it through, exactly as God commanded, and they finally arrived at a place called Kadesh Barnea. Now, Kadesh Barnea is a location you absolutely need to remember, because it sits right on the border of the hill country of the Amorites. After all that traveling, all those miles, they were finally standing right there, on the literal doorstep of their new home. And this brilliantly illustrates the tension between divine instruction and human hesitation. Right when they reach the border, Moses says to them, see, the Lord your God has given you the land. Go up and take possession of it. Do not be afraid. It's go time. But the people, they come to Moses with a totally different plan. They say, hey, let us send men ahead to spy out the land for us first, and they can bring back a report about the best route to take and the towns we'll encounter. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a perfectly logical sound military strategy, right? Which is exactly why Moses agreed to it. He picked 12 men, one from each tribe. They went up into the hill country, they explored the valley of Eshcol, and they even brought back some of the local fruit. And their initial report? It was good. They said it is indeed a good land the Lord is giving them. But, and this is a massive but, despite the good fruit, the people became completely paralyzed by fear. Why? Because the spies also reported seeing the Anakites. Now, these were a specific group of inhabitants who were exceptionally strong and incredibly tall. To the Israelites, they literally looked like giants. And if that wasn't bad enough, the spies told everyone that the people there were much stronger than them, and the cities were massive, heavily fortified with walls that seemed to reach all the way up to the sky. Hearing this terrifying description of giant inhabitants and impenetrable cities, the Israelites' courage just completely melted away. Moses tried so desperately to encourage them. He begged them to remember their own history. He said, do not be terrified. The Lord your God who is going before you will fight for you exactly as he did for you in Egypt, before your very eyes. He gave them this beautiful image, reminding them how God had carried them in the desert, just like a father carries his own son, the entire way until they reached this exact spot. He reminded them how God guided them with a fire by night and a cloud by day. But the people, they flat out rebelled. They completely refused to go up. They just sat there grumbling in their tents. And then they made this absolutely shocking, unthinkable accusation. They said God brought them out of Egypt simply because he hated them. They actually convinced themselves that God just wanted to hand them over to the Amorites to be destroyed. It's truly wild. Section 4, Judgment and the Defeat. Starting right around verse 34, Moses recounts the incredibly grim aftermath of all this grumbling. God hears their total lack of trust, and he reacts. And he reacts decisively. When the Lord heard what they were saying, he was angry. He solemnly swore an oath, and the judgment was incredibly severe. God decreed that not a single man of that evil, unbelieving generation would ever see the good land he had sworn to give their ancestors. There were literally only 2 exceptions out of all those adults. Caleb, because he followed the Lord wholeheartedly, and Joshua, who was Moses' assistant and the one chosen to lead them later. And here's the real irony. Remember the little ones? The very children the Israelites were crying about, saying they'd be taken captive? Those children were the exact ones God said would enter and inherit the land. Finally, God gave a new, heartbreaking command to the rebellious adults. Turn around. set out back into that dreadful desert, heading along the route back toward the Red Sea. Well, when Moses reported this devastating judgment to all the Israelites, this incredibly tragic irony unfolded. Suddenly, they totally changed their tune. Now they say, "Oh, we have sinned against the Lord. We will go up and fight, exactly as the Lord our God commanded us." Every single one of them strapped on their weapons, somehow thinking it would be an easy thing to just march up into the hill country now. But God immediately told Moses to warn them. He said, "Do not go up and fight, because I will not be with you. You will be defeated by your enemies." They had completely missed their window of obedience. The door was closed. But, acting in pure, stubborn arrogance, they refused to listen to God yet again. They rebelled against the Lord's command a second time and presumptuously marched right up into the hill country anyway. And the results? It was a total, unmitigated disaster. The Amorites who lived up in those hills came out against them, and the text says they chased them like a swarm of angry bees. They beat them down all the way from Seir down to Hormah. The route was swift, it was chaotic, and it was utterly devastating. They tried to fight without God's presence, and they were just crushed. Moses notes that they came back and wept before the Lord, but it was too late. God paid no attention to their weeping. He turned a deaf ear to them. And because of that, they were forced to just stay there in Kadesh for many, many days. Section 5. Key Ideas and Lessons. Now, having walked through all of that narrative step by step, several really clear themes emerge from this simple text. First, we clearly see that even a historically great, towering leader like Moses couldn't do it alone, right? Structured delegation is just an absolute necessity for effective leadership. Second, we learn what true justice looks like. It has to be blind. It requires absolute impartiality and the courage not to fear any man, no matter how powerful they seem. Third, this chapter really highlights that God's guidance is constant and tangible. He actively led them through that dreadful desert with a literal cloud and fire. And finally, maybe the most sobering idea of all, unbelief, that deep refusal to simply trust, directly blocks the fulfillment of promises. The land was sitting right there, completely ready for them, but their own paralyzing fear is what kept them out. So how do we translate these ancient historical events into practical self-improvement for us today? Well, first, when you are presented with an opportunity, your own personal promised land, do not let the fear of Anakites or high walls paralyze you into doing nothing. Second, when you face a new, scary challenge, consciously remember the times you were supported in the past. The Israelites should have remembered being carried like a child through the desert, and we need to remember our own past victories to build current trust. Third, timing is literally everything. Trying to force success in your own strength after you've already missed the right window of opportunity, that almost always leads to failure. And lastly, presumption. Just charging into a battle without the proper backing or preparation is just as dangerous and destructive as the cowardice that kept them hiding in their tents in the first place. Section 6, Chapter 1, Recap. Let's do a quick, concise summary of Chapter 1 to lock this all in. We begin with Moses speaking to the people in the Arabah, east of the Jordan, in the 40th year. He recounts God's initial command to finally leave Mount Horeb. He details how the massive leadership burden was wisely delegated to tiers of judges to handle the booming population. He then retells the pivotal story of finally arriving at Kadesh Barnea, sending those 12 spies, and the tragic, tragic moment the people rebelled in pure fear of the Anakites. Because of their absolute lack of trust, God pronounces a severe judgment, entirely denying that specific generation entry into the land. Finally, the chapter concludes with the people's presumptuous, arrogant attempt to fight anyway, which results in a crushing, humiliating defeat by the Amorites. It really leaves us with a profound question to chew on. When you are standing on the border of your own promised land, will you trust the guidance you've been given, or will you let the fear of giants keep you stuck in the desert? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.